My name's Walt Jenkins, 68 years old, retired mechanical engineer, and the last stubborn Jenkins still kicking on this family plot. For 17 years, I've lived in Kingsfield Estates, a quiet little suburb where the lawns are pristine and the silence can get deafening. My land, smack in the middle of this HOA-controlled paradise, is like a chipped tooth in an otherwise perfect smile. I inherited it from my dad, who inherited it from his dad, and so on. It's not much, just a patch of dirt with a house and a backyard big enough to dream on. And dream I did about corn. See, I'm not talking about some fancy garden hedge or those sad little petunias everyone else plants around here. I mean golden, glorious Midwestern corn, the kind that tastes like summer and looks like it's saluting the sun. My dad used to say, "You measure a man's soul by how straight he lays his rows," and I took that to heart. Last spring, I planted 30 neat rows out back, each stalk standing tall like a green soldier with ears raised high. It wasn't for profit or some grand farming scheme, just for peace of mind and the buttery joy of a July cookout. For a while, it was perfect. The wind would rustle through the stalks, and I'd sit on my porch with a beer, feeling like the world made sense. That is, until Marge Pilsner got wind of it. Marge is the HOA president, a clipboard-wielding tyrant with a superiority complex that could choke a horse. To her, my corn wasn't a crop. It was a crime against suburban civility. One morning, I caught her pacing the edge of my property, sunglasses perched like a hawk's eyes, staring at my rows like they were plotting a coup. The next day, a letter showed up in my mailbox. Cease and desist. Violation of HOA landscaping guidelines. Landscaping? This wasn't a rogue bush or an unkempt lawn. This was corn, Indiana's pride and joy. I figured I'd go to the next HOA meeting and sort it out. I've talked down worse, like that colonel with a live grenade back in '71. How hard could one agitated PDA dropout be? Boy, was I wrong. The HOA meeting was held in the clubhouse, a sterile box that reeked of lemon sanitizer and burnt coffee. I walked in, ready to charm my way through, but it was me against 12 board members and a handful of nosy neighbors pretending they weren't eavesdropping. Marge sat at the head like a queen in exile, flanked by two assistant Karens in matching sweaters, their judgmental auras practically glowing. She slapped a bylaw packet on the table like it was a death warrant and fixed her eyes somewhere above my head. "Mr. Jenkins," she said, voice dripping with disdain, "your yard is in violation of subsection B17. No unauthorized plantings beyond decorative flora. Corn is not decorative, it's agricultural." I gave her a half-smile. Ever seen corn sway in the wind at sunset? Marge? That's art. That's poetry. Beats your begonias any day. The room chuckled, but Marge's jaw locked tighter than a rusted bolt. "This isn't up for debate. You have 30 days to remove the corn, or we'll proceed with penalties." "Penalties?" I said, still amused. "For growing corn? For breaking the rules," she snapped. I leaned forward, letting the room go quiet. "Well, maybe your bylaws need a rewrite. My family's been on this land since before the first HOA paper pusher printed a flyer." Gasps. Someone coughed. Marge's left, I twitched like a malfunctioning robot. But she wasn't done. Without warning, she called for a vote, a rezoning vote to slap stricter rules on my property. The board nodded like trained geese, and 13 hands shot up. I was the only one down. "Motion passed," she said, smug as a cat with a mouse under its paw. Just like that, I was an outlaw in my own backyard. After the meeting, a few neighbors tossed me those half-sorry, half-amused looks you give someone whose house just caught fire. One guy patted my shoulder and whispered, "She fined Phil Bickman $2,000 for Christmas lights up till February. Be careful." Careful? That's not how I was raised. I was raised to stand tall in a storm, to find solutions when folks only offer complaints. So, as I stood in the parking lot, staring at the row of SUVs and manicured lawns, something clicked. They wanted me to rip up my corn? Fine. I wouldn't just grow corn, I'd build an experience. The idea hit me like lightning through the skull. I had rows, height, and space. What if I turned my cornfield into a maze? A twisting, ridiculous labyrinth of Indiana pride. If they wanted to play hardball with rules, I'd play jazz with loopholes. That night, I walked home grinning, 1,000 ideas sprouting in my head. This wasn't just about corn anymore. It was about principle, about roots, literal and figurative. Next morning, I called my nephew Todd. Todd's a wandering spirit. Started with architecture, switched to game design, tried YouTubing, and now mostly builds Lego cities while overanalyzing horror movies. But he's got an eye for design and a soft spot for his old Uncle Walt. When I told him I needed a cornfield turned into a maze, he choked on his Red Bull. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," I said. "Needs 3 dead ends, a secret path, and a fake scarecrow that screams when you touch it." He paused, then said, "Give me 3 hours and a whiteboard." By evening, Todd was at my kitchen table, armed with diagrams, pencils, and a laptop. We worked like maniacs. I marked the rows with old flag tape, while he plotted maze routes on a digital blueprint. We designed loopbacks, illusion walls from bent stalks, even a path that spelled NO HOA from above. Every twist had a purpose: confusion, fun, and a subtle jab at Marge. I rigged old garden hoses for irrigation guides, set up solar lights for paths, and hid Bluetooth speakers for spooky effects. Todd added a pressure sensor that triggered a cackling witch laugh when stepped on. I didn't ask where he learned that, and I'm not sure I want to know. We worked mostly at night, under moonlight and cricket hums. HOA patrols rarely rolled out after 8 p.m., and Marge seemed to think her victory was sealed. I wore a headlamp, hauled my toolbox, and bent the corn without breaking it to carve narrow hallways. Todd made signs, fake warnings like "Maze level, expert in no HOA members beyond this point." By the 4th night, it felt magical. What started as petty rebellion was shaping into a masterpiece. Word spread faster than I expected. I told one neighbor's kid, just one, and 48 hours later, 30 people lined up at my gate, asking if the haunted corn labyrinth was open. I hadn't even printed tickets. Todd, ever the hustler, whipped up a QR code system on his phone. We charged $5 a head, 10 if you wanted a flashlight rental. I cut a deal with the lemonade girl down the block to sell snacks, and suddenly, my little rebellion was outpacing my pension checks. Opening day, if you can call a permitless Saturday afternoon an opening, was chaos in the best way. Kids ran screaming through the corn, parents snapped selfies by the scarecrow archway, and some guy brought a drone to film it from above. It looked glorious, golden rose spiraling like a fantasy novel cover. A 7-year-old tugged my sleeve and whispered, "This is better than Disneyland." I almost cried, not because I believed him, but because I'd just beaten a billion-dollar empire with stubbornness and homegrown corn. Then the HOA showed up. Marge rolled in during peak traffic, beige suit crisp, bylaws rolled up like the Constitution. She didn't buy a ticket, just stood at the entrance, arms crossed, face sour enough to curdle milk. I waved cheerfully. "Thanks for coming, Marge." "Free flashlight." She didn't smile. "This violates several zoning laws," she barked, loud enough for the parents to hear. "Private land," I shot back. "You're trespassing without admission." The crowd laughed. Someone clapped. Marge turned tomato red and started filming on her phone. 2 hours later, she returned with a clipboard and a guy who looked like he flunked the firefighter exam thrice. "Safety inspector," she said. He pointed out, "No handrails." "It's a cornfield," I replied. "No elevators, escalators, or valet parking either." A woman in the crowd chimed in, "Got a badge," or "Is this another HOA stunt?" He mumbled and bailed, red-faced. Marge stormed off, muttering about lawsuits. That night, Todd brought pizza, and we watched folks exit the maze, faces lit with laughter and confusion. We'd added a secret prize in the center, a coupon for free kettle corn from the lemonade stand. People loved it. Some ran it twice, others got lost, and made friends finding the exit. I hadn't seen this much joy on our block in years, all because someone told me to rip out my corn. Then the local news showed up. A TikTok of the maze hit 100,000 views, and a reporter begged for an interview. "Make it to the center without your phone," I said. 20 minutes later, we were live on Channel 8, me in overalls, explaining how an overzealous HOA sparked this madness. I didn't name Marge. Didn't have to. Everyone knew. By the 3rd weekend, the maze was bigger than I'd ever dreamed. People drove from 3 counties over, cars lined the roads, and the lemonade girl hired her cousin to keep up. Todd started night tours for the brave and easily lost, and a food truck rolled in uninvited, claiming they'd heard business was booming. I let them stay after they bribed me with deep-fried Oreos and a corn dog the size of my arm. But all that attention meant more eyes, and those eyes belonged to Marge Pilsner, now teetering between fury and a nervous breakdown. She didn't just hate the maze, she feared it. Every laugh, every ticket sold, was proof her rules had limits, and I was thriving despite her. Her counterattack came dressed in pearls and petty righteousness. She called an emergency HOA meeting agenda, Jenkins' corn violation and community impact. I went, not for fairness, but for the circus. The room was packed, mostly with Maze fans, teachers, parents, even old Mrs. Delaney, who hadn't attended in 7 years. Marge sat stiffly, flanked by her clipboard Karens, and launched into a PowerPoint, the corn catastrophe. Blurry Maze photos, a list of infractions, unapproved commercial use, noise thresholds, reckless child behavior, even potential cult-like activity. That last one got a laugh, so loud the projector flickered. My turn. I walked up slow, no notes, just gut. I told them about my dad, how he'd grown corn on this land for 50 years, about his stories on the porch at dusk. I talked about the silence after he passed, and how the maze brought it back to life. For me, for everyone. Ever try to outlaw joy, Marge? I asked. A few nodded. One woman wiped her eyes. Then the bombshell. I dug into town records and found a 1946 document. My grandfather registered the land as a community celebration ground for post-war gatherings. The zoning never changed. I handed it to Barry, the quiet board president. Marge snatched it, scanning for a typo to save her, but it was there, faded ink, legal jargon, a loophole big enough to drive a tractor through. The room erupted. Marge shouted it was outdated, irrelevant, maybe fake, but Barry said, "We'll review it officially." That was all I needed. Next day, the maze was swamped. Lawn chairs, a banjo player, a popcorn machine. It wasn't just a protest anymore. It was a celebration. That evening, Todd showed me a marriage proposal filmed at the center. "You're a myth, Uncle Walt," he grinned. But then his phone buzzed, an email from the HOA's lawyer. Marge filed to nullify the land clause, claiming 50 years of inactive usage voided it. She was digging in, twisting history into a weapon. I didn't call a lawyer or the council. I called Gloria Simmons, retired principal, local legend, and the only person Marge feared. Gloria sighed sharp enough to cut drywall when I mentioned Marge. By noon, she was in my kitchen, sipping sweet tea like battle fuel. "It's time we turn this into a festival," she said. "One loud, proud weekend to honor your grandfather's designation. Make it impossible for her to deny this land's purpose." It was bold, risky, and perfect. Gloria called in favors, bands, businesses, face painting, barbecue. Todd built a stage from pallets. Word spread like wildfire, flyers, Facebook, texts. The Jenkins Jubilee was on, and everyone was invited except the HOA. The night before, I caught 2 county inspectors poking around. No badges, just windbreakers and a clipboard. I filmed them. They tripped and bolted to an SUV where Marge's blonde helmet ducked low. I installed motion lights and a speaker that screamed at midnight trespassers. Our Karen deterrent. It worked. Saturday dawned clear, funnel cake in the air. Music played, kids ran in superhero costumes, and folks danced near the stage. Corn shucking contests, trivia. Todd swore knowing kernel counts was vital. It wasn't just fun, it was a statement. People needed this. Marge showed up at noon, dragging a folding chair and zoning codes. She sat fuming, scribbling, then handed me a hearing notice. "Next week, zoning violations and unauthorized events," she smirked. "Thanks," I said, wiping pork sandwich hands. "Grab a corn dog on your way out." She stormed off, heels sinking. That night, the mayor wandered an unofficial, walked the maze with his grandkids, and told me, "Keep going, Walt. This is special." It was enough. The hearing day felt like a storm brewing. I brewed strong coffee and watched the corn sway like it was nervous too. Inside the community center, it was a dentist's waiting room with extra tension. Marge sat with her lawyer, a humorless suit, while Todd rocked a Conquer the System shirt and Gloria looked ready to lecture the world. Marge went first. Rules, aesthetics, noise complaints, all fake, traffic nonsense. Her lawyer argued the 1946 clause expired from disuse, falling under current zoning. Elegant red tape gymnastics to erase my land's history. My turn. I spoke from the gut. My dad's hands in the soil, my grandfather's laughter, the maze's evolution from defiance to connection. I showed photos, videos, letters, an audio of the mayor praising the festival. Gloria followed, her "don't interrupt me" tone taming the room. She read a widow's letter about the land's joy-filled intent. Silence fell, not cold, but heavy with shift. The board recessed. Outside, supporters held signs. "Let Walt farm in peace. This maze is amazing." We waited under gray skies. Coffee passed around. Finally, they ruled. The land stayed a community celebration ground. Retroactive rezoning was against the neighborhood's spirit. The maze, the festivals, the corn, they stood. Cheers erupted. Marge gathered her papers with shaking hands and walked out, silent. No threats, no drama, just defeat. That night, we lit the maze with every solar light I had. Kids laughed under stars, parents danced barefoot, and kettle corn scented the air. I sat on my porch, watching it glow, feeling peace settle in my chest. The sign got an upgrade. Entry $5, HOA members $20, kids free. Todd added, dedicated to everyone who stood their ground, even when it got messy. As wind rustled the stalks and laughter echoed, I realized they tried to tear out my roots, but I grew something unkillable. It started with a stalk and a no to a clipboard. Now it's a legacy, mine, my family's, in this town's. Let Marge come back. I've got corn, community, and a damn good story. Game over.